So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Kathryn Zupsic. I'll give you a short introduction, and she'll fill in a little bit more of her life, but she's an art educator, and she's been a docent at the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, the DeYoung Museum, and the Santa Barbara Art Museum. She and her husband decided they wanted to have a farm in Idaho, I guess, and so they live in Glens Ferry, but they also have a condo in Ketchum, so I hope we'll see lots more of her. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it over to you, and then I'm going to turn these lights out so it'll get fairly dark, but we'll have some lights around by the exit area. So again, thank you all very much. Muchas gracias. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much, Kristen. I hope you can all hear me. If you can't, wave your hand at me. It's very exciting for me to talk about Frida Kahlo. She has become one of my very favorite artists, and Latin American art is my official specialty in art, contemporary Latin American art. I do want to give a little warning. I see that there are a lot of families here, and Leonardo, you're going to translate this for me. There are just 2 paintings in here that Frida is partially nude, and I just want to warn you because you have children, but I do not think they will be upsetting to you or your kids. Okay, so let's get started. I am going to guess that every single person in this room and most people in the United States would know who this is on this t-shirt, even though all we see is a hairstyle and a set of eyebrows. Frida Kahlo has become an amazing icon in our time. She is the most famous, recognizable female artist in the world, living or dead, the whole history of art. And this actually has art historians and scholars a little concerned because her popular image has so completely overtaken the reality of the complex woman and artist that she actually was. So tonight, I am going to talk about the real Frida Kahlo. We're going to look at some of the things that come from the Casa Azul, or Blue House, in Mexico. This is where Frida was born. She grew up there, lived most of her life there, and she actually died there as well. Today it is a museum. It's kept exactly as it was when Frida lived there, and it is one of the most popular tourist attractions in Mexico City. How many of you have been there? Have some of you seen it? Well, if you haven't, go see it. It's just wonderful. So the Casa, oops. I have a little glitch there. When Frida died in 1954, only 47 years old, her famous artist husband, Diego Rivera, the most famous artist in Mexico, decided that he wanted all of her personal things to be locked away. And so this was his bedroom in the Casa Azul, and that door is one of the many closets that were locked with her things behind them. And for a variety of reasons, those doors remained locked for 50 years. They were only opened, they were only opened in 2007. And the museum staff just was shocked when they saw what was in there because it told us so much more about Frida and Diego both. So one thing were all of her costumes, the clothes that we know so well from her paintings and from photographs of Frida. Let's see, I guess, I'm missing one picture. There were also 6,000 documents and photographs of her and Diego. Most of the photographs had never been seen before. So I'm going to show you a lot of this stuff tonight, along with a selection, a good selection of her paintings that span her entire career. So, one of the most important things to know about Frida Kahlo is that she grew up during the Mexican Revolution. The revolution started in 1910 because this man Porfirio Diaz had been president of Mexico for 31 years, and while he had modernized the country with factories and trains, he had done so by favoring a tiny elite group of wealthy Mexicans and foreigners, many American companies and British companies as well. So in 1910, the people in the countryside had just had enough of this. There was 85% of the population could not read, and they were totally poverty-stricken. So they rose up. This is a vintage photo from the Mexican Revolution. These are soldiers in the South going out to fight. People in the countryside rose up and started this bloody war that would last for 10 years. Interestingly, women played a really large role in the Mexican Revolution. See this woman who's walking along beside the soldiers? Many wives left with their husbands and went through the whole war cooking for them and mending their clothes, sewing for them. These are indigenous soldiers in the South, the state of Oaxaca. And I want you to particularly notice these women, the ones sitting on the ground. They are wearing these shawls, which are called rebosos. And they have made them themselves with these, looms that they strap to their waist. And, oops, I'm showing that, sorry, there's something wrong with this. I'm showing you these because we're going to see Frida Kahlo wearing them a lot, even though she was certainly not impoverished. But this would become part of her costume later in life. And these are some of the famous soldaderas who actually went into battle with the Mexican revolutionaries. And the revolutionaries won the revolution. In 1920, they won, and the revolutionary government opened a new government in Mexico City. This was the first president, Presidente Alvaro Obregón. So, one of the ideas of the new revolutionary government was that art would play a big part in educating and unifying the country. So they started a program of murals on walls around Mexico. Murals that would show the history of Mexico, that would show the different indigenous groups of Mexico, that would educate a population, so many of whom could not read. And the first thing they did was get in contact with Diego Rivera, who was actually in Europe. He was in Europe for 15 years painting modern art that didn't look anything like these murals. He was painting with people like Pablo Picasso. And they convinced him to come back to Mexico and start painting murals. So this is in Mexico City. There are many of his murals still in Mexico today. And this is one good example. We're looking at workers. We're looking at ordinary people, workers going down into the mines. And if you look at, this man in particular, he's carrying a piece of wood, but see the way he's carrying it? He looks like Jesus, doesn't he? He looks like Christ going to the crucifixion. So this is one of the ways Diego Rivera was so brilliant, taking the ordinary people and lifting their importance visually in his murals. Another example, he made beautiful paintings of the different indigenous groups in Mexico, groups that had just been ignored completely by this elite group that had been in charge before. And he shows the beauty and creativity of their cultures. He also painted the great past civilizations of Mexico, which had also been pretty much ignored. This is the Aztec city at Tenochtitlan, the way it looked when Cortés arrived in Mexico. So Frida would be just starting high school when the revolution ended. She lived in Mexico City, very sophisticated urban girl, but look at her, look at what she's wearing. She is wearing a rebozo, the same as the impoverished indigenous women we saw earlier. And her jewelry is from the beads she's wearing or from the ancient Aztecs. They've been found, you know, on the ancient sites. And her earrings are made by local artisans as well. So she will come of age with this deep pride in her Mexican heritage. The idea, just as all people did after the revolution, deep pride in being Mexican. And she will grow up surrounded by artists, thinkers, filmmakers who come from all over the world, many coming from the United States, to take part in this artistic revolution. This is called the Mexican Renaissance. I'm having to speak a little more slowly than normal just because of the translation, just to let you know. I keep getting signs in the back that I need to slow down, so if I sound like I'm treating you like kindergartners, that's why. So Frida was born in 1907, but she would later lie about this and say she was born in 1910 because she wanted to be able to say she was born the year the revolution started. This is a problem when you're researching Frida Kahlo, because she would make up a lot of stories about her life, funny, dramatic stories, but when you're reading about her, you never quite know exactly what is true. So these are her parents. Her mother, Matilde Calderon, was from the south. She was from the state of Oaxaca. And she was mestiza, which means mixed Spanish and indigenous blood. Her father, Guillermo Kahlo, was actually European. His family were Hungarian Jews who had migrated to, several generations before he was born, had migrated to Germany. So he was a German citizen, but as a young man, he crossed the ocean by himself at 17 years old and went to Mexico City to find his fortune. And he became a professional photographer. His job was working for the government, documenting government buildings that were going up all around, and factories that were going up around Mexico. And he also, fortunately for us, took a lot of pictures of his family. This is a picture he took of his wife dressed up as a soldadera, as a cute little revolutionary. And he took many, many pictures of Frida, his favorite. He had 3 daughters. Frida was just so smart and creative. She would work with him in his photography workshop. She learned how to develop pictures and, you know, really how to do professional photography from a young age. But she also became really used to posing. She was very good at posing for the camera, smiling. Here she is at 12 years old, but Frida isn't smiling anymore at 12. When she was 6, she contracted polio, and she had to remain isolated in her bedroom for 9 months. She missed out on school, she missed out on all her friends, and she said later that at this time she developed this little imaginary friend who was actually a second version of herself, a second little Frida. This is important because we are going to see this in her art as well. She also said, now this is a girl who was not going to be left behind. She would go to school. When she came back from being isolated, one of her legs was thinner and shorter, and she had a limp, which she retained for the rest of her life. And the kids teased her. They called her pata de palo, which means peg leg. She said that she just wasn't going to take that, so she became the girl who was kind of bad. She was the girl who was a tomboy, she was outspoken, she was full of mischief, she got in a lot of trouble, so that everybody knew who she was. She was not going to be left behind. Here's a picture of Frida on the right in the little sailor suit, sitting with her sister Christina on the left, and in the middle is a friend. And you see that the girls have crossed their ankles. Well, Frida is putting her skinnier, shorter leg behind. She's going to do this all the time in photographs. She's always going to be kind of trying to hide that one leg. Here she is in high school. Her father has taken all of these pictures of her. So this is a very classic photography style where your shoulders are facing forward, but then your head is turned a little bit, so there's a 3/4 view of your face. And then she locks eyes with us. She's staring right into the camera, right at us. We're going to see this pose exactly the same in so many of her self-portraits going forward. She looks like she has a long hairstyle pulled back into some kind of a bun, but this is actually an extremely short haircut. This is the 1920s. So she's an urban girl. She's a flapper. So she has an extremely short cut called a shingle bob. It was called a shingle bob. So here's her family. See the girls, they're flappers. They're wearing those 1920s dresses that go just to the knee with those cute little shoes. But can you find Frida? Look for that haircut. Yes, that's Frida. That is Frida. She's surprised. She's surprised. Here, let me see. There. See? You can see her face. She surprised her family. They were really shocked. She showed up for the family portrait wearing her father's suit. And this tells us a couple things about Frida. She was very interested in posing. See, she's taking this mannish pose. She has that hand in her pocket. She looks like a man. She loved posing. She loved using clothing to identify who she was, as you see here. And then there's also this little androgynous quality about Frida. She was very small and petite and feminine, but she kept that unibrow all her life. Here, let me show you another little picture. Here's a painting. She said, "Of my face, I like the eyebrows and the eyes. Aside from that, I like nothing. I have the mustache and in general, the face of the opposite sex." But the funny thing is, she was just fine with this. In the 1920s, very thin eyebrows were in style. Every stylish woman plucked their eyebrows. Not Frida. She always kept them looking like this. And in her paintings, she made them even more dramatically hooked together, kind of like two arches, kind of a design element, I would say. And then that mustache, any stylish woman would have shaved that thing off. But again, she just had her own idea about how she should look. One friend said she would make a joke about it every once in a while. She would stand up at a dinner party and announce, "Excuse me, I have to go shave." So for high school, Frida went to the National Preparatory School, the best school in all of Mexico. They had just started admitting girl students. So there were 3,000 boys and 35 girls when she went. She got in because she was very, very smart. But she was a terrible student because all she wanted to do was get into trouble. To play pranks. Her group of friends were the bad kids. They got into a lot of trouble at school. Her goal, though, was to go to university and become a doctor. But fate intervened with that plan. When she was a senior in high school, she was riding home on the bus and it crashed into one of these. These were brand new modern streetcars in Mexico City. And when they found Frida, she had been thrown from the bus, she was on the ground, and a metal pole from the bus had completely impaled her through the pelvis. So this is the only drawing she ever did. She didn't do this to sell. She just did this for herself, this drawing of the accident. So you can see up above the bus colliding with the streetcar, the bodies on the ground, and then herself here below, bandaged up on the stretcher. And then look at that little head above her. That's probably that second Frida that she always imagined there at the site of the accident. Frida, she broke her spine in 5 places. She crushed her right foot. She broke her right leg in 11 places. She punctured lungs. They could not believe that Frida lived. It was a miracle that she lived. She did not go on to university. She never even went back to high school. She had to spend a whole year recovering in bed, lying down the whole time in traction. So her mother came up with this idea to build an easel that she could draw while she was lying in bed. And she put a mirror in her canopy so she could look at herself and draw herself, which is how Frida started making so many self-portraits. So she would live, after that accident, she would live for 29 more years in constant pain in her back and her right leg. She would have 22 grueling surgeries in that time with long recovery periods that she would spend time in bed. And the worst thing for her was that she was never able to have children because of her damaged pelvis. But it was the accident that put her on the road to becoming an artist. She never would have done that otherwise. So this is the first kind of big picture that she made, and she's still in high school. She made this picture. So you see, she hasn't started wearing Mexican-style clothing yet. She's wearing this very sexy red velvet dress, and because she's going to send this to her boyfriend, who was ignoring her since she had the accident. So she was kind of trying to get him back. But look, already, it's that same pose, isn't it? She's got her face turned to the side. She's looking out at us seriously. Frida Kahlo met Diego Rivera, the most famous artist in Mexico, when she was only 20 years old. He was painting a mural, so he was up on this big high scaffolding, and she was just so bold. She yelled up there and interrupted him and asked him if he would come down and look at her paintings. And unbelievably, he actually did. He came down and he looked at her paintings, and 1 year later, they were married. They were a very odd couple, as you can see. He was so famous. Nobody had ever heard of her. He was 43 years old. She was 22. He had been married 3 times. She had never been married. He was enormous. He was over 6 feet tall and weighed over 300 pounds. She was tiny. She was 5'2" and weighed less than 100 pounds. Her mother just couldn't stand the idea of them getting married. She said, "It's like an elephant marrying a dove." But you could see why she would love Diego Rivera. He was brilliant, funny, charming, and he loved her for her crazy sense of mischief and her wonderful sense of humor. They had a lot in common. They were both members of the middle class. Diego Rivera's parents had been school teachers, and they both believed passionately in the goals of the Mexican Revolution. They both were members of the Communist Party and fought their whole lives for the poor people of Mexico. Here they are in a march for a union. This is their wedding photo. Frida, always rebellious, did not wear a wedding dress. This is a dress that she borrowed from a maid at the last minute, or so she says. We can't be sure. But look at her, she's smoking a cigarette in her wedding photograph. And then look down at her legs, look at her feet. That awkward stance is because she's so used to trying to hide that right leg behind the other one. After they were married exactly 1 year, they went to the United States. San Francisco first, then New York, then Detroit. Because Diego Rivera was extremely famous in the United States. He was actually more in demand than any American artist. It's hard to even describe how well known he was. So he had big mural commissions in all of those cities. Now here they are in San Francisco. He is making drawings, getting ideas for murals while she looks on. She had never been out of Mexico City before, so this was very exciting for her. She loved San Francisco. She had a lot of free time while he worked, so she got to explore all the neighborhoods. Her favorite was Chinatown. And she started to paint seriously at that time. This is a painting she did, so it's 1 year after their wedding, and so this is a marriage photo of the two of them. So you can see that she isn't painting, she's painting in kind of a folk style, not deeply realistic. It looks a little bit like a folk painting. You can see she's dressed in one of her Mexican outfits now. The colors of the Mexican flag, tiny huarache sandals, and a rebozo in red. She's showing Diego in a suit, a nice suit, but underneath he has on a workman's shirt, and he's wearing miner's boots. So to identify him with the working classes that are so important to him. But then look at the way they are, and of course he's holding his brushes and palettes. She sweetly leans in toward him, she's reaching for his hand, but look at him. His head is turning the other way, isn't it? As he will always be turned the other way through their whole marriage, obsessed with his work and looking for other women. He was a serial adulterer. He was always with other women. So she seemed to understand this already in the first year of marriage. And this little banner she's painted above their head just says something factual. Here you see me, Frida Kahlo, with my beloved husband, Diego Rivera. I painted these portraits in the beautiful city of San Francisco, California, for our friend Mr. Albert Bender, and it was the month of April in the year 1931. I was so disappointed when I realized that's what it says, because it looks like it would say something very poetic, doesn't it, with that bird flying in? But she's taking this from folk art, from Mexican folk art. This isn't folk art, this is an early portrait when Mexico was still colonized by Spain. And you see that writing there, just right on the painting, right here. You see writing, and it is just factual. It's just describing who this lady is. And then this is Mexican folk art. This is called a votive painting. These are paintings on little pieces of tin about the size of a piece of paper, and they are not professional. They're very amateurish. They show things like this. This is a couple who is lost at sea, and they are begging the Virgin Mary up there in the sky to rescue them. And when they survived, they, as a thank you, they made this little painting and said on the bottom, just factual information. On the 20th of September in 1925, in the port of Veracruz, we were rescued from shipwreck by the Virgin Mary. So Frida loved these paintings, and so you can see how similar the style of this painting is to the kind of painting she is doing right now. And she loved them because they were traditional Mexico, unique to Mexico, because they are about the ordinary people of Mexico, and also because they are about human suffering, which she understood very well. It was when she was in San Francisco that she realized the power of the way she was dressing. In Mexico City, right after the revolution, it was pretty common for artistic, bohemian women like her to dress in these indigenous styles. But most people stopped doing that after a year or two. Frida would dress like this for her entire life. And when she came to the United States, nobody had ever seen anybody dress like this. She just became a huge celebrity. So these are two famous San Francisco photographers who both asked to take her picture. She said she wrote to her mother, "The gringas just love me." In San Francisco, they love, their jaws drop at the sight of my jade necklaces. And what these necklaces are, so these are beads, Aztec Mayan beads, Mexican jade, that have been found on these ancient sites that she has taken to someone to make into a necklace. So huge celebrities, the press follows them everywhere they go. Here they are in a Chinese restaurant, and you can just see these two women are dressed in the styles of 1930s, a suit, a hat, gloves, and then look at Frida. She just caused a stir everywhere she went. And notice too, she is referred to in this as Mrs. Rivera. She had no identity of her own at all at this time. So what exactly is Frida wearing? She is wearing, I'm going to actually go one more. She is wearing the traditional outfit of the women of Tehuantepec, which is down in the very south of Mexico. And these were very independent women, which is one reason Frida would have liked them. But look at what this costume is. It's a skirt that goes all the way to the ground. So you know why she would have liked that. It hid that leg. And then the top is very loose. Here she is wearing it. Here's Frida in it. And she needed that top because she often had to wear some kind of a brace underneath to shore up her torso. So it hid that as well. If you go to the Casa Azul, you can see her real clothes. And if you look closely, you can see paint, splashes of paint, cigarette burns, signs that she really lived in these clothing. And some of these would be made authentically in Tehuantepec, but others she would just have tailors in Mexico City make, often out of synthetic fabric. This was part of her artistic creation. She would just invent these costumes in this style. Her friend said it took her about an hour to dress every day because she did the hair ornament and the full makeup. Over time, she began to dress more and more flamboyantly, often with full makeup like this, rings on every finger, lots and lots of jewelries, and an elaborate hair ornament. The fashion world did take note of Frida Kahlo. She was so original. She was in a spread in Vogue magazine in 1937. And the great Parisian designer, Elsa Schiaparelli, designed this Madame Rivera dress in 1939. Again, notice it's Madame Rivera, not Frida Kahlo. Nobody would have known who Frida Kahlo was. Some of the best pictures of her were taken by fashion photographers. Usually when you see a color photograph from this time, it was a fashion photographer who took the picture. This is my personal favorite picture of Frida because it shows her personality. I think she had, everybody who knew her says she had this big, warm, generous spirit. She was fun, she was funny. As tiny as she was, she had kind of a deep, hoarse voice and a deep, contagious laugh. She loved using foul language. She could drink enormous men under the table. She was just wild. And all of her friends and family absolutely loved her. They said she appeared happy always, in public and with the family. But appearances can be deceiving because everything she was designed to hide what was going on underneath. Most people, very few people knew how disabled Frida Kahlo was. She did not want that to be her identity. So she almost always had on a plaster cast like this. She had painted this one, as you can see, with a broken column representing her spine there. And, oops, sorry. I guess it's still there. And this is another type of corset she had to wear. Metal with leather over it, which would just be so uncomfortable to wear. So here is one of her paintings. So now we see this true thing about Frida. Everything she does creatively about the way she looks is designed to hide what's going on. In her paintings, she will reveal what's going on. So here, she shows her pain as nails sticking into her, and she is wearing this very uncomfortable corset. It looks like that's the only thing that is holding her together at all. The backgrounds with Frida are always interesting. The background mimics her broken body. It looks just like it. We see her tears. And there you see that. See what I meant about the eyebrows becoming kind of a design element on her? But, I mean, look at her. She is beautiful. This is another interesting thing about Frida Kahlo. She always continued to represent herself as a sexual being, right along with her disability. She didn't let those two things cancel each other out. And for this, one of the groups of people who are huge fans of Frida Kahlo are disabled people. The disabled community loves Frida Kahlo for her strength and her insistence that she was an attractive sexual being, even though she was disabled. She would allow the press into her bedroom while she was lying there recovering. Here you can see she painted all of her corsets. Her friend said she would dress every day as if she were going to a fiesta up until the very end of her life when she was really, really miserably ill. Here's another picture of her in bed. One friend said, you would go to Frida Kahlo's, you would visit her to console her, but it was you yourself who would come away consoled. She had such a richness and generosity of spirit. Eventually, she had to have that right foot amputated, and a few months later, she had to have the leg amputated below the knee, and she just didn't live very long at all after that. She would die at the age of 47 in 1954. They said it was a embolism, but she was taking so much medication, often with alcohol, that it might have been an overdose, maybe even intentional. Hard to say. So now just a little treat. I've got tiny bits of footage, home movies, silent, of Frida Kahlo, which gives you a much better look at what she was really like. Doesn't she appear different when you see her in motion? I mean, I think she does. I love this second one where you can tell that she said something funny, and then, of course, she's smoking her cigarette. So I'm going to finish by talking about a few of her paintings, and I have decided Frida painted self-portraits, but she also painted portraits of other people. She painted still lifes, a few landscapes. But I'm going to stick tonight to her portraits, which I personally think are her masterpieces and tell us the most about her. So this is 1937, Memory. This is something she painted the topic as coming of age. Frida did not tell us very often what her paintings meant, so we kind of have to figure this out ourselves. But here she stands, divided. She's divided by this shoreline. And on one side, she has a dress from childhood, there on the left, bizarrely with one arm reaching out to her. On the other side is that Tijuana dress, also reaching out to arm, but Frida has taken that arm, that would be her choice as an adult. She has been pierced through the heart. Her heart lies huge, bleeding, swollen there on the beach. And strangely, she has no hands. There's something helpless about her in this painting. And she has tears. Her feet, one foot is like a boat. That foot that's in the water is like a boat, which makes you think wanting to sail away, this is the direction she's going anyway, isn't it? Toward the Tijuana side of herself. But we just don't know. In this one, by the way, she herself is dressed in contemporary dress of the 1930s. This is her most famous painting, The Two Fridas. So here you see the Tijuana on the left, right, and a European. Remember, she is half German. So on the other side is Frida dressed in a European dress like her grandmother would have worn of that era, or maybe even her mother. And then she always said that it was the Tijuana that Diego loved. So Frida had a lot of affairs too, but Diego just broke her heart over and over and over. She loved him. So he loves the Tijuana, and in her hand, that little thing she's holding is a tiny portrait of Diego. And from her heart comes an artery winding around to that. That's where her heart's blood goes. But then there's another one that reaches across to the other Frida, attaches to her heart, and that one is just bleeding out, isn't it? She is trying to clamp it, but the love isn't going where she wants. What were you going to say? Yes, it's a clamp, exactly, that she's trying to clamp it. And she cannot cut that. She can't cut it. They would both die. She would die if she cut it. So, and then the background again, these agitated looking clouds. So again, this idea of the two Fridas that we've seen before. This is also, her paintings were usually really small. See this one in the background there? This one was big. Each character is actually life size. But most of her paintings are about like this, probably because she was painting in bed so often. She painted this while she was in Detroit. Diego did, his masterpieces are in Detroit, that he did for the Ford Motor Company. She hated Detroit. She loved New York. In New York, everyone thought Frida Kahlo was magnificent and brilliant. In Detroit, I think they just thought she was kind of weird. And so here she has put herself on the borderline between Mexico and the United States. Mexico's on the left. So you see the ruins, ancient pyramids, the sun and moon, so important in ancient cosmology, Mexican artifacts on the ground, and these lush Mexican plants in the foreground with their roots going down into the soil. Her depiction of the United States is very different. In the background, the temples of the United States are skyscrapers. And you see the factory with F-O-R-D, Ford, written on it from Detroit. Then these weird vents, these seem to be the human beings of the United States. And in the foreground, electrical appliances with their cords going down into the soil. So she's expressing her feeling that the United States had lost touch with its agrarian roots and with its past, with its pre-industrial past. So then she stands in the middle in that goofy looking dress and little gloves that don't look like she would wear. She's doing that because she said this is what she was supposed to wear to these parties in Detroit, these high society parties. So she's just looking rebellious. She's smoking a cigarette. She's got the Mexican flag. And she evidently did terrible things at these parties. Frida spoke English really well, but she had a thick accent. And so she would just be conversing with people, and she would throw in filthy, obscene words every now and then, but she would just pretend like she didn't know what they meant, like she'd accidentally said them, but she knew exactly what they meant. You might notice too, I don't know if you can read this, that it says Carmen Rivera instead of Frida, or it's because Carmen was her middle name, and remember her family, her father is German. So Frida was a German name. So as Hitler was taking over in Europe, in Germany, she did not want to go by Frida at that right at that time. This is what Diego was painting, an enormous, enormous mural. As a communist at that time, his feeling was that industry would be the savior of the common man, of the poor people. So it seems like he's, selling out to the capitalists, but to him it's the opposite. So this is one of his murals, and it's interesting that this painting, a few of her paintings were kind of like murals. So she was being kind of affected, influenced by Diego at this time. There are so many things going on here. This is a picture of her painting this exact picture. So you see how small it actually was. And you should know that Diego Rivera always encouraged Frida about her art. He thought she was a brilliant artist from the very first day he met her. So in that one way, he was wonderful to her. While they were in Detroit, Frida had a miscarriage. She had had many miscarriages before, but this time she was 4 months pregnant. That was the farthest she'd ever gone, so it was just devastating. And she paints this self-portrait real small on a piece of tin. We know what she's thinking of. A little portrait on tin, lying in bed, just looking so vulnerable. She doesn't even have a sheet to cover her. She's bleeding. She's not even centered in the bed. She's just so uncomfortable. And then look at that uncomforting background. That's the Ford motor plant back there. And then instead of having Jesus or a saint floating in the air, like from one of these votive paintings, she surrounds herself with things that mean something to her. A miscarried fetus, a snail, because she said it took so long for that miscarriage to happen. It just went on. And then down here, a damaged pelvis, which is the root, of course, of her problem. These things are not identifiable. We're not sure. Art historians and gallery owners at this time wanted to lump Frida Kahlo in with the surrealist painters because they, of course, were painting bizarre things too. They were painting the subconscious mind. They were painting dreams, basically. But Frida always said she did not want to be lumped in with them at all. She said, I am not painting dreams. What I am painting is very real. This is my reality. And because of that, to this day, in art history, Frida Kahlo cannot be classified with any group. What she did, showing her personal feelings in this symbolic way, was absolutely original. Nobody had ever done anything like this. And so to this day, anybody who does do this is just kind of copying Frida. But she was so very unique. When they went back to Mexico, after 4 years in the United States, she basically stayed there for the rest of her life. And at one point, Diego asked her for a divorce. He had fallen in love with someone else. And they did get a divorce. They only got divorced for 1 year. They got remarried. And Frida did cut off all her hair that Diego loved. And look at what she's wearing. She's not wearing that Tijuana outfit that Diego loved anymore. She's back in a man's suit. And above, she's written, look at her hair, the way it's so creepy, like animals on the ground. What she's written up above is a little Mexican folk song that says, look, if I loved you, it was because of your hair. Now that you're bald, I don't love you anymore. So she painted this just a little while later while her hair was growing out. So when she tries to braid it, it won't all fit in the braids. You know, it's all kind of wild up there on the top of her head. And look what she's wearing here. Nothing. She's just covered up by these plants. So again, this time without Diego is the only time that she doesn't paint herself with that particular identity. Maybe she was feeling a little more independent. It's hard to say why. But so here, look at she's got these kind of plants that look like knives almost, and then those stems that remind me of the arteries that we saw in the two Fridas. And then the necklace that she's wearing kind of looks like a yoke, doesn't it? She wore this all the time. It was a gift from Diego. It was made of Aztec beads. So here she is, just a year after the divorce. Back in San Francisco, they got remarried, and she's wearing that same necklace. But Frida made some rules before she would marry Diego again, and one of them was that the marriage would be celibate. She would not have sex with him anymore because it was just too painful to have him fall in love with other women. So here she paints herself in a rebozo, but it's turned backwards and it's brown, so it looks like a celibate monk's habit. And then look at this necklace. We all recognize that. It looks like thorns, like the thorn crown on Christ at the crucifixion. She's wearing one earring, which we'll see in your painting later. She is wearing just one earring that is a hand. We've seen the idea of an amputated hand before too, haven't we? Again, and then look at this background. What? I don't know. Hard to say. We don't know. The earring also looks like Mexican folk art. Little milagros are little charms that are intended to promote healing. And she actually did have hand earrings that were a gift to her from Pablo Picasso, who thought she was one of the most brilliant artists he had ever seen. He thought she could paint better than he could. This is the last painting I'm going to show you. When I first saw this, I saw this in person at an exhibition in San Francisco, and I just hated this painting. I don't know why. That just looks so much like something she wouldn't wear. She looks so miserable and uncomfortable in it, but over time it's become one of my very favorites. Look, this is not folk painting, is it? Look what a good painter she's become. The way she paints that lace so beautifully in so much detail. And then in the background is so similar to the lace that it almost doesn't look like she's wearing something as it looks like she's somehow back behind the canvas looking through. And as much as she loves this indigenous garb, this is a dress, a thing from Oaxaca that they would wear on holy days. She looks trapped in this, to me, somehow. Like it's like a nun's habit, a wimple. We see her tears flowing down. One interesting thing about her portraits across the board No, we often know that she is feeling pain or anguish. She has her tears, she has these symbols around her, but her face remains a mask, always. Same position, looking right out at us, locking eyes with us. The only change might be some tears. And so that's always been one of my questions. Would Frida's, does that make her work more powerful, or would it be more powerful if she did show expression? You don't have to answer now. It's just food for thought. Oh, this is that resplendor. This is what she's wearing. This is her mother's family wearing this. This is her mother when she was a little girl. See, look at this dress, how much it looks like the dress in the two Fridas. She owned a resplendor. Here she is wearing it. This is at the Casa Azul. So I'm going to finish up by telling you, I do think Frida became a famous artist in her lifetime. She actually, when they were in New York, she became the darling of the New York critics. She had a solo show. And interestingly, the person who bought the most of her paintings was the actor Edward G. Robinson, which is, who knows why, but he bought a lot of her paintings. Then when she went back to Mexico, just before she died, there was a retrospective of her work. But she died in 1954, and she was forgotten. Little bit known in Mexico, not in the United States at all. When I took art history in 1971, she was not in the book. And you can imagine, it was not until the late 1970s when a group of Chicana artists in San Francisco mounted an exhibition about her. And from there, her fame just spread like wildfire. She is much more famous now than her husband, Diego Rivera. And there are so many people who love her so much for so many different reasons. She has just become such an icon. This is the last photo I will show you, tell you about. She's standing in the garden of the Casa Azul, which was beautiful. This was just not long before she died, and posing in one of her beautiful Tijuana skirts, looking very elegant. And a famous photographer took this picture. So she has written an inscription up above that says in Spanish, "No olvides de Frida." Is that right? Don't forget Frida. It says, don't forget Frida. She knows she's dying. It's just so heartbreaking that she would never knew how unforgettable she would become to us. So I'm just going to let you see a little bit more of her work, the Casa Azul to start with, and some of the paintings that she did in her garden there, many of them of the wild animals they kept there. Okay, so that's the end of my presentation. Thank you. Thank you very much. Do you have questions or comments? Any comments? Do you like her work? Yes.
A lot of the leaves in the background of the paintings look like things that were in her garden.
Yes, the question was, do a lot of the leaves that are in the background of her paintings look like things in her garden? Absolutely. Most of these outdoor ones were based on what was in her garden, which was really lush and beautiful. But she turns them sometimes into knives or spears or, yeah, all sorts of different things. Yeah, even this one, that's right. The leaves are beautiful, but then there are the thorns. Well, it's just like the same thing with the monkeys, you know? The monkeys are, they're two things. They look like, their paws are creepy. They're, you know, cute animals, but then they have these creepy paws, or lots of times they could strangle her with her hair ribbon. So it's real common for her to show two sides of something. Any other comments? Well, it's gotten late, and thank you so much for staying. Oh, yes.
What you're saying a Tehuana shirt?
Tehuana, yes.
What does that mean?
Tehuana means from Tehuantepec. So it just means that it's from that area down there in the south. Yeah, not Tijuana, yeah. Well, thank you. I hope to see you again. Next Friday at 7 o'clock, I'll be talking about Diego Rivera, who is a fantastic artist, underrated in my opinion, and we'll hear a little bit more about Frida. And then the next week, at Friday at 7, I'll be talking about Chicano art, which is just magnificent art. I tell you, that is the one I would recommend most. When I give that to groups, they love that art. It's wild, vibrant, wonderful, sometimes kind of edgy, but just spectacular art, mostly from Chicanos living in LA, Southern California, and Texas. No, it's not graffiti.
So thank you, Kathryn. That was a wonderful, wonderful presentation. Just a couple of things, and Romero, could I ask you to come up for a second? Those of you who have the translation headsets, if you would take them back to Leonardo in the back, I appreciate it. I think Romero had something you wanted to say, so.
Well, first of all, let's continue to give an incredible round of applause to Ms. Kathryn, and of course to Christine. Please. I am so jazzed, goosebumps of this turnout of our second annual kickoff in our 5th annual Hispanic Latin Heritage Month. Please read about it, do your research. It means so much, not just to Mexican Americans, Chicanos, but Central Americans, South Americans in this valley. That's why I love this month, you know, this national festivity. I just want to make sure you know that we thank you for spending time to listening and learning and lead the support of this kind of events with any organization, because we need more. It brings us together. It brings our children together to play piñata, and we missed out on a loteria. Loteria is basically bingo in the Hispanic community. But we thank you. Please get the word out. We have an incredible lineup tomorrow. We have an incredible mariachi that's coming from Utah, and they're coming in the early morning. So they're going to be here 12 to 2, and then they're going to La Cabanita restaurant to go play some more over there for the families there. But again, I just want to thank you for supporting the contributions and the achievements of our Hispanic community in this valley. We're not just hard workers. We have contributed a lot. We believe in leadership. We're professionals. We're not just family people. We are educators, artists, like Kahlo, Frida, Diego Rivera. And today, from LA, we are bringing an incredible icon from the Peruvian community. If you want to see who he is, know about him, please join us at Serva's Peruvian Cuisine tomorrow at 8 o'clock in the evening. You guys will be amazed. And Ketchum, the old Ricos. They just got here today. They're getting into their hotel right now. And tonight we're going to go eat some dinner right now. And then tomorrow, like I said, you guys are going to be blown away. If you like salsa, they're going to play some salsa. You like that Peruvian music, they're going to play it. So again, muchas gracias. And thank you. 8 o'clock in the evening.
And I will finish by saying that none of this would have happened without Herbert Romero. Yes. So please give him a large.
Sí se puede.
Thanks, everybody. Good night.